Welcome back. So second half of the week, I'm up at Britt's, and as you can see, I've got Britt at the controls here, drilling these holes there in the side stick and preventing me from messing them up, because I only had one go at this, didn't have any spare of those 70-75, so just using the centering drill there to get it started there on those end pieces, which are the 60-61. And so just putting two holes in that, and I actually decided to drill those through on the diagonal, and that way when I put the bolts through and clamp it, it's not going to sort of crush the outside round 60-61 tube, and presents a little bit of a problem. So a little bit more difficult. Even drilling through that 60-61 is okay, but when you hit the 70-75, you're hitting the sharp edge there, and you just got to take it real slow, so it doesn't force the drill bit to walk down the one side and then elongate the hole in the 60-61. So we just took it real slow on there, and Britt did the first one and then I did the second one, and those came out really good. So the next step there, as you can see, I've got a couple of bolts in there, snug fit, so the bolts need to be really sort of pushed in hard there. So anyway, the next thing to do is drill those little end caps there that have the bearing in it. So we just positioned that and drilled through the 70-75, and then we put the square tube cover back on the top of that, and then drilled that through as a match drill set, and just ended up drilling that through there with an end mill, because that hole was recessed in there to have the room for the bearing and the nut, or at least the nut I should say. And so you can see Britt's doing the other one there. And the reason for the end mill there is because you got that sort of end of where it was drilled on the end there, and it's tendency to want to make the drill bit walk to one side, so using the end mill prevents that from happening. And so next thing is to drill the little slots 8 inches down the tubes there for where the wire is going to come out. And so just an end mill on there. I think we end up using a 5/16 inch end mill, and came into where the end of the hole had been drilled, because I had the guys at this other shop drill it out to 8 inches deep, and so we just located where that was and just picked up the end there, as you can see, and now you can feed the wires through there. So mission accomplished on using 70-75 and running the wires through. So here Brett's just using his tiny little grinder there, just to round off the edges there to stop the cable from having any sort of sharp edges that it runs against. And this is the other one that he's already sort of done there. So yeah, that's how that's going to work out, and he sort of rounded it there down towards where the hole starts. So you can see, yeah. So that's that job out the way now, and time to put everything back together. So this is what those sticks look like now that they're all done. You can see that gold color on there is the hard anodizing that I had done at that metal finishing shop. And there's the holes that were drilled there. So I had them 8 inches deep at 3/8 of an inch, and then a little bit wider. I believe it was half an inch. Yeah, half an inch for the first 2 inches. So there was room for the wire to pass the bolts. And then this end had 9/16 of an inch. And that was room for the bolt there in the end where it has to swivel. So this is what one of them looks like here now, going through the fixture that I created. And you can see there's not much of a downhill slope on that thing, but there's enough if I let go of that, it just wants to roll out of there. So there's no play in it at all. It's just running really smooth on those V-groove bearings, so I'm pretty happy with that. And the harder surface there works even better than the 60-61, which had a tendency to just feel a little bit soft there running on those bearings. So the next thing I had to do was remove the connector there from the wires from the previous stick, so I could pull the wires back through. So I've done that. And now I'm feeding it back through the new stick there, and just got the tail of it coming out the hole there, because I've got to go and put it in the aircraft first before I can run all the wires back through. Otherwise it would interfere with that first section there where the bearings are. So you can see I've got that in there now, and I've got the the stick assembled, and everything's nice and tight there. There's no play or movement or anything like that. It's really good. So there you can see how the wire's coming out there, and there's plenty of room for that to sort of go through its motions there without getting tangled or having any sort of load or stress on the wires. So that's good. And yeah, here you can see I've got it hooked up just temporarily now to the plug, just to make sure all the plugs are working now. Now you can see coming out where it stops, and it stops just shy of that bracket there, so I don't have to worry about anything interfering with the wires there. So pretty happy about how that came out, and it's nice to be able to run the wires internally instead of externally, and also be able to use 7075. Alright, so now I'm onto the right hand side one, and I pulled the assembly out there so I could fine tune it on the bench here in terms of setting the tension and just make sure everything's really good. And you can see that I've got it dialed in nicely, and there's virtually no friction going on whatsoever there, and there's no play in it, so it doesn't sort of move in and out sideways between those V-groove bearings. It just rolls nicely on there. So really actually happy with how this solution came out. And so this is what it looks like now installed over there, and everything all bolted into place, and you can see it's running super smooth there. Again, if I just let go of it, just with the downhill slope, it wants to just run out of there. So that's how smooth it is. So there's no friction whatsoever on that whole setup, which means the breakout force on there when you're pulling back on the stick should be basically zero, whatever friction is in the rest of the system, not in the stick. And now I've got that all assembled. I've put the wires and stuff in there and put the stick on, and you can see I've gone and basically set everything up and put a little loop in there. So I've got this ability now, or the service loop, so there's enough room in there for that to move around, and I put a bit of electrical tape there on the end where it comes out there, just to stop any potential wear on that edge where it comes out. And I think that should be decent enough. And of course that wire has that sort of braided plastic sleeve on it, so it should be okay and not wear. And this is the one on the other side, done the same treatment on there, just some electrical tape around there just to prevent that wire from moving around. And you can see there's enough room in there for everything to move around, and nothing's going to bind up or get caught or anything like that. Alright, so up next, before I take the aircraft off the blocks, I wanted to do some more tuning on the gear. I wanted to see if I could slow down the down cycle a little bit more, just by increasing the setting on the resistance for the flow. So that's kind of how I had it before, and just by adjusting the valve that I have on the upside, it allows the pressure that's going through the system when the gear is coming down, it actually allows you to slow the whole thing down a little bit. But when you adjust that, you also have to adjust the pressure switch, because when you slow the whole system down, it creates a little bit more pressure in the system, and the tendency is the pressure switch is going to cut things off. So I've got to do one at a time and just see how it goes. There's not anything more I could do with the up circuit. I think that's just how it's going to be. So I'm pretty happy with that. It's still going to do that little duck waddle thing at the end. So there you can see the way I've adjusted it now. The pressure is a little bit too tight, and the pressure switch keeps tripping on and off. Eventually it goes down, but obviously that's not ideal to keep doing that. So I either have to open the valve a little bit more, or change the pressure switch so it only cuts off at a slightly higher pressure. And so it's just a matter of tuning it in. But at the same time, I also have to be wary that if I increase the pressure there on the valve, that the down circuit when I do the dump is potentially going to be compromised as well, because now it's not going to flow as well as what it would normally do if it was more open. So it's kind of like a happy medium that I have to try and find there. So it's a little bit of trial and error, and then ultimately you find where it needs to be, and then you back off a little bit, just so you've got a bit of a safety margin there in case something, you know, changes with temperature or pressure or whatever. But overall, I'm pretty happy how it ended up working. You can see I still need to adjust it, so I just cut the power there so I can go and adjust the pressure switch first, just so it stays on longer at a higher pressure. The one thing that you don't want to do that I found out on this is leave the power on when you go to adjust that pressure switch, because when you shove the Allen wrench in there, you can get a good shock on there when it powers up. It's not fully insulated. Yeah, I'm getting closer there, but still not ideal. And so the pressure is just building up too much there, and it's tripping the pressure switch. So again, just had to play with this for quite a while just to get it dialed in there. And then ultimately, like anything, once you've dialed it in, you've got to do like a full regression test there. So I test the up circuit again, test the down circuit again, and test the up circuit again, and then test the dump thing again, just to make sure all those things are working smoothly, because the last thing you want to do is make a little change and then not test the dump thing, because then you may have affected that. And you don't want to set the pressure switch too high. At least, you know, I don't think it's a good idea, because why run higher pressures in the system than what you need? You're just, you know, asking for a possibility of a leak somewhere. Or, I mean, I don't know if you could damage the pump itself. I doubt you would damage the cylinders, but anyway, you just don't need, you know, want to run it too high if you don't have to. So anyway, as you can see, probably getting sick of watching this, but I actually like watching the gear go up and down, and I like the fact that I can just leave it on the blocks here and just test it a bunch of times and get it nicely tuned in on the ground, and know that, you know, once it gets up in the air, unless there's something weird going on, it should work as advertised. It's looking pretty good there, although you can hear it still clicking on, so the pressure switch is still set a little bit too low, or the valve is needs to be open just a little bit more, because, you know, I don't want it to keep cycling there every now and then when the last bit of pressure is building up. I want it to sort of come up to the pressure fairly quickly and then just stop. And the other thing that ends up happening too is when you power up the ship, if for some reason the pressure is reduced anything at all, it automatically sends more power to the pump just to repressurize it on the down cycle, which is kind of like a safety to make sure it stays locked in place. So almost there, but not quite. So anyway, after a bit more tuning and another test of the dump system to make sure that was working, this is how the final tune ended up looking. And I forgot to actually video the dump test, but I can assure you I did do it, and it works as it was working in the last video I showed you. It comes down nicely and locks into place just with a couple of touches on that down circuit switch that I have in there in the center console. So I did manage to make a little bit of improvement there. I think it's a little bit slower on the down circuit, but it still works fine. So anyway, on to the next thing. So when Justin was here last, he wanted me to put some safeties on these door handles so they couldn't accidentally be pulled open. So I've just gone and taken a braided hair tie there and a riv nut and a screw, and I've just sort of bolted that in there so you can quickly put that on there, and it'll hold the door handle down. And when you need to open the door, you can just flick it off with one finger there and open the door. So that's that job done. So yeah, 6 weeks it took to start off and do this redesign of the whole stick assembly, how it all worked, and do the CAD and buy the materials and get everything made and send the stuff off for hardening and machining, and a bunch of hours up at Brit's shop. But overall it came out really well, and you can see ailerons are working really well there now. And I have 190 pounds now that I put on the cable tension. That seems to be working fine. You don't feel any friction coming in there from the cables running on the pulleys. So, and there's little to no breakout force required there. So hopefully Justin and Elliot will be happy with that. And this is how it looks with all the panel all put back in there. And I've cleaned everything up and vacuumed it all out. And so my basically to-do list is done now. So the next thing I'll be doing is getting the aircraft out and taxiing it around a bit and just having a feel how the ailerons and elevators feel now with that new assembly in there. But I've talked to the line guys because I'm at the back of the hangar now, and I need to see if we can get moved to the front because I've got 3 other aircraft in front of me. Anyway, so that'll be the next goal, and hopefully you guys will see it next time back out on the taxiway and moving around. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next one.